Hey patrons, thank you so much for all of the support. It is very much appreciated. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up reading Silverthorn by Raymond E. Feist. This is book 3 of 4 of the Riftwar Saga, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing this book, which was a few days ago because I was on vacation and didn't want to make a video while I was on vacation. So this was a little confusing of a book for me because there were things I loved. Quite a lot of things that I loved, but there was a good portion of this book that I was quite bored with, and because of that, I'm going to be settling on 4 out of 5 stars. So, I reviewed the first book in this series a few months back, and that's called Magician, and I had heard a lot of good things about this. It was a classic fantasy, something that I'm not super into, but I want to give it a shot, because I'm trying to read, the best of the best that fantasy has to offer. And that's certainly on that list. And I loved it. I went on record saying I thought it was a better old school book than like The Lord of the Rings was, which a lot of people don't love when I say stuff like that. But I like Lord of the Rings, don't love it. But this was just incredible. For an old school fantasy, it just rocked on so many levels. Now, I felt like the quality of the second book dipped a little bit. There were some weird decisions that were made. It felt like the momentum from the first book just kind of got upset a little bit, and it took a while for that second book to really get started. Now, when it did, it was awesome, but it took a while for that to happen, right? Well, this one was also rather strange because, we've spent 2 books by this point following 2 main characters, and, Thomas and Pug, and, I love these characters. We've spent so much time with them, I feel like I've grown with them, and I want to see how their stories continue. But in this book, it's not about them at all. It's about a totally different person. It follows this kid, Jimmy, who is an expert thief for a young kid, and his exploits. And it just was like, why is this happening? Where is this story going? I don't get it. Because after the second book, it felt like the story was done. It was like, okay, we've capped it off, we're over. And I was really curious how this third book was going to go. And so it took a long time for that story to develop. Having said that, I did really enjoy this part of the book. I found myself falling in love with this kid, Jimmy. I really wanted to see what was going on with my 2 best friends elsewhere. But I was enjoying myself. Albeit rather confused about what was going on and why. Now, when the plot finally reveals itself, and it does because you all of a sudden hear the word Silverthorn thrown out there in sort of like in a fetch quest form, and then you're like, okay, that's what we're doing in this book. We're doing a fetch quest book. I don't love that kind of stuff, right? It happens a lot in fantasy, where you have this whole huge mission that you're going to end up accomplishing at the end, especially for an old school book. And that's clearly what was going to happen here. So, for a large portion of this book, how this story is going to unfold and what's going to happen at the end of it. But I'll say that that's just an odd decision. But we go down that quest, and I just found myself getting rather bored. We had a small snippet of Pug. And it's like, is he now just a background character? Not even like a secondary character, but just truly a character with a few pages of depth in the story. And they go on this quest, and it's long. It's what I feared would happen. And I thought to myself, this story is going down the drain. What are we doing here, Raymond E. Feist? But the story got rescued. I'd say about 60% of the way through the book, everything turns around. All of a sudden, Pug becomes a star of the book. He has an incredibly interesting, storyline that goes on. I found myself enthralled. And from that point forward, I had an amazing time. Even when we got to bounce back to the quest that was going on, we had enough time with that really fun stuff that it was okay going back to it because I was invested on finding out what was going to happen there. So that's, in general, kind of the direction this plot goes. And in general, it was overall good. And I find myself really interested on how this final book's going to go. This book tees up this final book. Not to say, here's what's going to happen, but here is a lot of things that could happen. One of them's going to have to happen. You guess and have fun. And I'm really excited for it. So, yeah, my excitement's at a high. Now, In terms of the other parts of the story, on the things that I kind of like and don't like about fantasy books, there were a lot of good things to like here. I love the way the magic works here. And it's definitely like a soft magic system. It's not overused. But the fantasy elements is what brings all of this magic to heart, because it's got a sci-fi thing going for it, even though it's hard set in this fantasy world. I don't think you're going to hear a lot of people say this is like a sci-fi book, but it is core. What this Riftwar story is about is a rift opens up, which takes a different world and allows them access into this world. And it has alien people that come through that are not well-intentioned, as you would expect would happen in this moment. They see resources that they would love to have, and dang it, they're going to try to get them. And that feels very sci-fi, and it's fun, and it's fresh. I don't see this aspect where you have a predominantly fantasy book with some light sci-fi elements. I see it the other way around a lot, where you have like a primarily sci-fi book that feels kind of fantasy-ish, thinking like Sun Eater. It does that very well. Thinking of like the recent book by Will White, The Captain, feels a lot like that as well. So there's a lot of examples of that, but I haven't seen it in this way. And I love that kind of thing. I'm just, enthralled in it. And I can't wait to read not only this final book, but this whole, the Riftwar Saga is a 4-book series, but it's within the capsule of this Riftwar, what is it? There's the Saga and Cycle, Riftwar Cycle. And it's like a ton of books long, and some of them are written or co-written by Janny Wurts. I just read a Janny Wurts book recently, and I loved her writing. And I'm really, really interested in reading the second series that's written by her, because I just love the setting here. It's really fun. Speaking of the setting, I'm all in on this world. I'm all in on both these worlds that are happening. They feel so different and unique. I love the different political structures that are going on. They feel alive. And I love how big they are. I love that we're never going to be able to see every stretch of this world. It would take way too many books. That's what makes a world feel real to me. When it just feels like my own world, I'm never going to see a fraction of the whole world. But it is real. It feels like, you could go anywhere. It fills the mind with imagination. And I love that kind of thing. I find the characters to be, while not like the greatest written characters in the world, they're enjoyable and they're fun, and I want to see them do well. Even the characters that I don't like very much, they're kind of classic-y villain. I mean, this is a classic kind of story, and it's great. And I think a lot of people won't end up reading this series because they have this fear that, look, this is an old-school fantasy story that has drifted off over time. It's not nearly as popular as it once was, and it didn't catch hold like a lot of older series had. Now, I realize that it's still, a well-known series, but every year that goes on, it will become less and less well-known until eventually, not very many people are going to know about the series when you go decades down the line. And I find that a shame, because I think this is one of those timeless stories that you could read at any point and have a great time. And now a lot of people say that about something like The Lord of the Rings. I don't agree as much, but it has that similar vibe to it where, it's never going to date itself. I read the series for the first time. And I've read a ton, hundreds of fantasy books before I read this, and it's great. It holds up amazingly well. The prose is kind of, it has a classic feel to it. It's not going to like wax poetic. You're not going to be just wowed by what's going on, but it just fills you with a fun time. And that's ultimately where I'm left on this whole series, is it's a lot of fun. Now, I'm praying that this last book will hold up and that I can, look back on the series with a really positive light, because if the last book really flubs it, I'm going to be disappointed. And I'll still keep reading a little bit. I'll give it more chances, because the next series is written, at least co-written by somebody else. But, we'll see. But I'm holding out hope. I don't know. I haven't heard much, because I never hear anybody talking about this. Like, I have a room in my Discord channel where some people talk about it, but it's people that read this book a long, long, long time ago. And so I don't know. I don't know what this last book has in whole. I don't even know what it's called. But if you have thoughts on the last book, let me know in the comments. Let me know if I should be excited. Let me know if you think I'm going to be disappointed. I'd love to know. So I'm going to wrap this up there. Thank you so much for watching this review, and as always, happy reading to you. Want to give another shout out to all of my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, Brian, CJ, Darren, Jonathan, My Book is Lit, Miranda's Bookshelf, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Angelo, Ben, Blair, Brock, Evan, Harry B, Jamie, Joe, Maria, Michael Sugarman, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion.